Welcome to the Aaron L Show. So we're gonna do this video about YNW Melly and YNW Bortlen. Them boys been down about 7 years for that double homicide. If you've been under a rock and don't know nothing about this news, I'm gonna give you a little update of the information that I have. And these boys are charged with a double homicide. YNW Melly, YNW Bortlen. They were leaving the studio in a car 4 deep. YNW Melly was in the back seat behind the driver. YNW Bortlen was driving, and supposedly 2 of their friends were in the passenger seat and the rear passenger seat, and they were all leaving the studio. One thing led to another. 2 of his friends got killed, YNW Melly friends. They claim it was a drive-by, and when the police got to investigating the situation and took a look at the situation a little closer, the police believed that the passengers were shot inside the vehicle. So they were charged with a double homicide, and YNW Melly and YNW Bortlen went to trial, fought the case, and they had a hung jury, and the DA refiled on them again. Now, the update is that YNW Bortlen has took a deal. He has took a deal where he's going to receive 16 years. If I'm not mistaken, he's going to do 10 years in custody with 7 years credit for time served, or 6 credit for time served. We don't know how the court's going to give him on his credit for time served, but he shouldn't have but a few years left to do and come home on 6 years probation. Now, where does this leave YNW Melly? Because I'm sitting back looking at the case, and I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, he pled no contest. Now, I've caught charges before, and I pled no contest. But what I'm basically saying is I'm not guilty of the charges, so I'm not going to say guilty, but I'm going to say no contest. But what you got to realize is no contest is the same thing as pleading guilty, because why would they be sentencing you to jail time for a no contest if you're not pleading guilt? So let's get that out the way. Let's quit minimizing no contest. No contest is the same thing as saying I'm guilty. You know what I mean? So at the end of the day, YNW Bortlen, he is pleading out. He's pleading out to lesser charges. He's going to get, I think he's going to get accessory after the fact. Now, my thing is if you an accessory after the fact, that means a crime was committed and you helped after the crime was committed. Whether you knew the crime was committed or not, you participated in the crime after the crime was committed. So now my thing is if you're going to plead to accessory after the fact, then you admitting the crime was committed. Now they trying to say the crime was a drive-by. Now the evidence is pointing in another direction, but they don't have a motive. That's the one thing that the police always look for, is they look for a motive. Why did this happen? Usually, let's say if a husband kills a wife, they usually find out that he was having an affair, it was some infidelity going on in a relationship, or she was cheating and he found out, and then that was the motive for the reason why the crime happened. Now in YNW Melly and YNW Bortlen case, they can't really figure out what the motive was, because these guys were friends. They don't hear no backstory that they was having any feuds. It just was a night at the studio. They did their music, they left. YNW Bortlen and YNW Melly is saying the camera saw them leave in a car 4 deep. They saying they hit a few corners, let Melly out. He jumped in with a female, or jumped in with some other dudes and spent off. Then the drive-by happened. YNW Melly was not there. YNW Bortlen saying that he did not shoot his friends. It was a drive-by. He the one drove him to the hospital. Now, what does this do for YNW Melly case? Because YNW Bortlen is off the case, so now he has to fight this case head on by himself, and his only defense is I wasn't there. Now, I'm going to have to look at the case a little bit deeper and figure out what was his alibi. Okay, you wasn't there. Well, where were you at? Who picked you up? Is there anybody coming in to testify that I was the one picked you up and I took you here? Is there any gas stations you stopped at? Is there any cell phone pinging to show you wasn't with these guys? I mean, it's a lot of stuff that the evidence has to show for him to beat this case, but for him to get a hung jury, his lawyers did a pretty good job with defending him. Now they have to come back around with the district attorney that realized the mistakes they made in the first go round, and they gonna come with some better evidence the second go round and try to convict you. Now, can YNW Melly lawyers maneuver enough to get this boy off this double homicide, which he's facing the death penalty, if not life in prison at the least? But now you got the situation where YNW Bortlen, they saying he's got to do a proffer. Now, proffer is where, you know, sometimes they have jail time hanging over people's head when they do a proffer. So when you hear a proffer, you start thinking, okay, this dude done signed a proffer agreement. It's part of his release to go in there and run his mouth. You know what I'm saying? So, but YW Bortlen lawyers are stating that it's not that type of proffer. They're going to ask a couple of questions and they getting up out of there. He could plead the fifth and leave, which I doubt that. You know, they gonna want some real information. They not finna let you just get up in there and sit down. They ask you 2-3 questions. Oh yeah, I plead the fifth. Gonna give me my 10-year sentence, send me to prison. Let me go and do my 36 months, and then I'll be back on the street. I don't know if it's gonna be that simple. You know what I mean? Because, you know, they can ask him one simple question. You know, you said YW Melly wasn't there. Was he truly there? Yeah, he was. And you can walk right out the room. That makes him guilty. You know, he lied. You said you wasn't there. We just got this guy saying you was. Now, he not going to get on the stand and say that, but the DA behind closed doors, they heard it out the horse's mouth. You was there. You know what I mean? So, okay, now they just got to maneuver their evidence to point at that. Okay, well, where was he at? Who was he with? You know, let me get them to come in here and lie up under oath. You know what I mean? Let me grab who said he was with them and apply some pressure to them, and maybe I can get them to crack. We don't need you to crack. Just point us in the right direction. You know, so I believe, to be honest with you, it could be a little bit. Now, let's sit back and look at some of these cases that we've been seeing in the news lately, which is Young Thug. Young Thug had a similar situation, even though I don't think the murders was, you know, hanging over Young Thug like that, which they wasn't. It was people in his circle who had murders, but Thug had nothing to do with it and wasn't there, and they know Thug wasn't there. You know, and it's a lot of evidence showing Thug wasn't there. Now, but we can also look at the situation and say, okay, Thug did have a couple of people that played out, and then when it came to it, Thug ended up walking. Now, I don't know in YW Melly case, they're going to be willing to say, hey, look, we're willing to throw all this out, you know, offer you 20 years, break down the case a little bit, and give him, and you know, I don't know, man, give him a manslaughter, or, you know, break it down to a lesser. I'm not really for sure, because you can't really call it first degree murder. Anything could have happened in that car. They could have tried to rob Melly and he shot him, and they claiming it's a drive-by. It could have been a lot of things going on that led to him having to kill them if he killed them, you know, because, you know, he stated he wasn't there. But let's say YW Bortlen do go in there and get him enough evidence where they can hang something over Melly's head, where, let's say, he just put him in the right direction. You know what I mean? You know, let's hypothetically say he go in there and say, well, yeah, Melly was there, and, you know, he jumped out the car and called somebody to come pick him up, you know, and then I drove him to the hospital and claimed that it was a drive-by, with the whap. None of this could be held against him. Now, I'm pretty sure his lawyers, YW Bortlen lawyers, already gonna have paperwork that's saying, you know, anything that he say cannot be held against him. You know, he can walk out of here. If he tell you he shot him in the head, he can still walk out of here. He's already got his deal. I'm pretty sure his lawyers are smart enough to put him in a position where he can go in there and tell the truth about whatever he done or whatever happened, and he can still get the same deal he got. But my thing is what if he say, okay, well, yeah, you know, Melly was there. I shot the passenger in the front seat. He shot the passenger in the back. And we called a friend of ours named whoever, and they came and picked Melly up, and Melly told me take them to the hospital. Now, my thing is this. Now, the DA could take that information and go press the cats that YW Bortlen just said picked Melly up, press them hard enough. Okay, well, look, y'all about to get accessory after the fact. That carries 20 years, blah, 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 blah. Now, if Melly boys hold strong, that might not work. But, you know, if you keep shaking a tree hard enough, a leaf is eventually going to fall. And the DA know that. They in the business of that. They've been doing that. And they know they just need to sit the right person in the chair and offer them enough time that they probably ain't even going to get, but just throw enough time at them to where they fold. Yeah, okay, he did call us that night and whatever. Or a female, he done mentioned it too, you know, before they arrested him or anything. But, you know, this is my update on it. Everybody saying YW Bortlen is telling. We can't tell what he's doing until he do the proffer, and then we see how YW Melly case progress. But I can guarantee you the DA will get some information out of YW Bortlen that can hurt Melly but YNW Bortlen is not going to be charged for nothing he states to that district attorney. I can guarantee you that, because that's how the DA rock. This the Aaron L Show. Like, comment, subscribe. You comment, I'm going to holler back at you at the comments. Like the channel, subscribe to the channel. I'm trying to get this to 1,000 subs and up and up and up from there, man. So rock with your boy. It's the Aaron L Show. Holla.